Hi BookTube, it's Amy. I'm here with the next chapter of A London Book Window by James Milne, and this week's chapter is titled First Novels and Novelists. First novels and first novelists have always interested me, and why not? No things in the world have the interest, the beauty, the thrills of first things, whether they be a baby or a book. Maybe that is why it is so splendid to succeed with a first effort at fiction. None of the successes which come afterwards, good though they may be, can ever compare with the first fine fragrance. There are two ways in which a first novel may succeed, two ways at least, and when one says that, one is speaking of talented writers, not of genius, for when it comes along it cuts its own swath, fearing not and caring little whether it earns benediction or anathema. A novel may be a work of art and so lift the writer's name high, making it only a question of time when he or she shall also become successful in the sense of circulation. This was how the beginning of fame, and therefore the beginning of prosperity, although it was long on the road, came to Joseph Conrad with his Elmer's Folly. The other way is to write a first novel which shall take the public by the heart, even if the critics do not have anything very great to say about it. Of course, the perfect way to become a first novelist is to blend the two sets of qualities and be at once a bestseller and a classic. Only that is unusual. What are the troubles which breed the way? They are plentiful. For myself, I would almost certainly set out without knowing just where my plot was going. That would land me about the middle of the story in flops and wobbles and all manners of emergency. Perhaps about where the reader would get tired of me, and so I would not be a successful first novelist. Possibly, being a little hazy about my plot, I should also be a little hazy about my characters, with the result that they would be a company, I hope a pleasant and interesting company, instead of a family of highly distinctive individuals. Here again I should be in trouble with my readers, because readers never like a mob, for the simple reason that they can see a mob any day in any street. What they look for and expect are real people, such as in individual way may come within their own lives and who therefore become interesting people. If I did not, as I should not, be sure of my characters, I would develop them as I should probably develop the plot, with much unnecessary detail, and that would finally confuse my readers and entirely bar the way to the success of my first novel. There is an old story of the London book world, which may be recalled as suggesting the things necessary in a first novel and a first novelist. A well-known publisher, now no more, was called upon by the young son of an intimate friend with the question, "I want to be a novelist. Will you tell me, sir, what I should do?" "Young man," was the answer, "I cannot tell you how to succeed in the most difficult profession in the world, but I can give you one or two hints as to how to set about it. You should clearly decide in your mind what you wish to say. Then you should decide equally clearly how you wish to say it. And finally, you should say it all as clearly and concisely as you can, in not any more than 100,000 words, and if you can make the words fewer, so much the better." That was not only good advice to a young man self-called to be a novelist, but it was practically all the advice that can be given to anybody, young or old, who wishes to pursue the craft. There can be no general prescriptions for success, because the final deciding element is the presence or the absence of personality. If there is no personality behind a story, it lacks life and color and verity. It is merely a long stream of words which flow well or ill, but which bear on their bosom no living tale of human life such as a novel should carry. We do not all have personality, and perhaps it is as well that some of us should not have it. It is, however, a supreme gift, whether it amounts to talent or goes higher and becomes genius. This will appear from a glance at a few of the first novels, which have become conspicuous in our time, especially as that also means a glance at their writers. Some of you may not be old enough to recollect when the Stick It Minister by Mr. S.R. Crockett came out and at once made a hit, not only in Scotland, where for its colouring it would naturally make a hit, but in England, in America, and wherever the English language is spoken. Until then, Mr. Crockett had been, as he remained for some years, a Scots minister, what the hero of his narrative would have been if he had not become the Stickit. He was only, however, the hero of one story in the book, because it consisted of a series of tales. The sketches appeared serially from 1891 onwards in the Christian Leader, owned and edited by Mr. William Howat Wiley, a master of editorship. Mr. Crockett had the cuttings from the Leader carefully pasted onto a single sheet of paper, edited and made up in volume form. And then he entrusted the finding of a publisher to Mr. Pollock Wiley, who, after submitting the work to several leading London houses, without result, managed to persuade his friend, Mr. Fisher Unwin, to do a small edition. It appeared in 1893, and its success was so great that a second edition was instantly needed, and many other editions followed. One might dwell on Sir James Barrie's Auld Licht Idylls, the first book to win him fame, upon The Lightning Conductor by Mr. and Mrs. C.N. Williamson, and upon many other first novels which heralded success for their writers. It is more interesting, however, because less known ground, to speak of lesser and newer first novelists, although probably that description would not apply to Miss Ethel M. Dell, who jumped into fame with The Way of an Eagle. It had appeared serially in a London magazine, and there its qualities of emotion and observation, and therefore popularity, were noted by some onlooker who was not wrong. Why was it successful? Perhaps the hero, Nick Radcliffe, had a considerable deal to do with that. He was not good-looking, but heroes do not need to be good-looking if they have hearts of gold, and he had one. He was a fascinating hero, if an ugly hero, and all the young folk took him to their favour, and they have kept him there ever since, for The Way of an Eagle, Miss Dell's first book, has a continuing circulation. Whenever you find a successful first novel, you find it in the touch of humanity and personality. It was present in David Harum, an American first novel and bestseller, which was as successful here as it was across the Atlantic, because it was written under peculiar conditions. Its author, Mr. E.N. Westcott, had been a banker, and he became ill, and the doctor said he would not live, and being unable to work any more at banking, he sat down and wrote David Harum. It will be seen, therefore, that when he wrote it, he was a condemned man, that he was writing with his heart, his soul, and his mind working carefree of worldly things. It filled his illness to write the book, helped him through with it, but he could not find a publisher anyhow, not easily. Eventually he threw the manuscript onto the top shelf of a cupboard, and there it lay until, as he said himself, he could smell it whenever he opened the front door. Thanks to a happy chance, he did find a publisher, and on his advice he reconstructed the book, and in its new shape it simply stormed to victory. Only Westcott did not live long enough to be the happy first novelist he otherwise would have been. Rita, the owner of many dogs, which she treated better than she treated some of her friends, and Miss Braddon, her antithesis in appearance, character, and temperament, all wrote first novels of which one might say something. So did Thomas Hardy and George Meredith and Walter Besant, and a whole string of Victorian writers, including Marion Crawford, whose Mr. Isaacs is a first novel to which one reader, at all events, constantly goes back. So attractive it is, so full of colour, the romance and the mystery of India. Again, however, the younger novelists, those of today, claim us writers like Miss Sheila Cain Smith or Miss Victoria Sackville West, who was a poetess until she became a novelist by writing heritage. Her poetry was characterized by an unusual austerity of expression, combined with great mentality and descriptive power. When she wrote heritage, these gifts passed into wit, and the book was distinguished by a purity of style and a clarity of vision remarkable at all times when, perhaps, the finer qualities of literary craftsmanship are not cultivated by every English writer. Somebody once asked Charles Reade the secret of storytelling, and he said, "Make him laugh, make him cry, make him wait." It has been well said that Mr. Dennis McCall carried out this ruling in his first novel, Bill the Bachelor, and he carries it out in the books he has written since. He has humor, which makes you chuckle rather than golf, and this is a quality most precious to a novelist, because it gets the cultivated reader as well as the other reader. It is easy to manage farce or low comedy at all events, comparatively easy, but Mr. McCall avoids these things and makes his readers laugh as a gesture would do, without putting out his tongue. Not long ago there died a lady, Miss Lily Dougal, who won a name with a first story called The Zygist. She went on writing distinctive novels for a while, and then she turned to theology, and she published in the year 1900 a work, Pro Christio et Ecclesia, which was much discussed and read in theological circles. Here was a case of a woman who could not only write good fiction, but admirable theology, as her subsequent books, including one entitled Christus Futurus, proved beyond any shade of doubt. Not every first novelist becomes a theologian, and one of Richard Cobden's daughters was content to be just a novelist after she had written Wistons, with which Mr. Fisher Unwin led off his first novel library in 1902. The idea of that series was a recognition of the importance of the first novel, and Mr. G.K. Chesterton said cleverly that it showed a very dark and cunning knowledge of human nature. It was not as Ellen Millencrest Cobden that Cobden's daughter wrote Wistons, but as Miles Amber. Her real name was not disclosed until her second novel, Sylvia Saxon, came out, and she was very content to take her distinctions modestly and quietly, the only pity being that she did not write more because she had a real gift, and it was something also to have a London publisher for a kinsman. Did you happen, some years ago, to read a first novel of unusual force and vigor called The Mask by Mr. John Kornos? If you had asked about the author, you would have found that he was born near Kiev in Russia, and that at the age of 10 he emigrated with his family to Philadelphia. Quite rightly, we should associate the originality in the book with his early life story. There is no doubt that the experiences which meet a man in his young days, say from 10 to 20, bite deeper into the soul than the experiences of another time. There is another new first novelist who should be noted, and her name, that of a Scotswoman, is Miss Agnes Murr Mckenzie. Her novel had the title Without Conditions, and the scenes of it were laid in the Aberdeenshire Highlands. Its austere beauty came from the lights and shades of that wonderful region, as they play on the lights and shades of the life of Janet Brodie, a very perfect Highland lady. What Miss Murr Mckenzie told was the love story of Janet Brodie and Alan Crawford, and it was the most beautiful thing in life to them both. He was a gallant gentleman, and she thought her love was returned, but alas, no. That takes us to the heart of a tale as delicate as you could fancy, trembling a little on every page, yet strong with a strange, intense flame. And so that is First Novels and Novelists. And I will be back next week with the next chapter in this collection, titled Old Wine in New Bottles.